Why would seemingly reasonable and rational people build their houses on the side of a cliff where they can only access them by ropes or ladders? Let's see if we can find out. Hello and welcome to part 4 of our epic road trip. This time we're going to Mesa Verde National Park. We're going to be spending a few days there. There's lots of fun things to do. But the first thing we're going to do is make a quick stop at the visitor center and then do the Mesa Top Loop. Mesa Verde National Park is located in Colorado, about 50 miles northeast of the Four Corners area. Mesa Verde National Park was established by President Theodore Roosevelt on June 29, 1906. It is the only national park in the United States created to preserve ancestral Pueblo culture and prehistoric architecture. The park preserves an extraordinary record of these Pueblo people who made Mesa Verde their home for over 750 years. These pit houses and cliff dwellings were occupied from around AD 550 to about 1300 AD. The 6-mile Mesa Top Loop takes you through 700 years of ancestral Pueblo history, from remains of early pit houses and masonry villages to multi-storied cliff dwellings. Archaeological sites along this loop show how early Pueblo architecture evolved. I think most people are aware that the National Park Service, or NPS, has a pretty nice website and an app you can download. But Mesa Verde also has its own app. It's one of the few parks that actually have its own app, and from that app you can download an audio tour of the Mesa Top Loop that's a companion that goes through all the stops and has a little explanation of what you're seeing at each stop. And the great thing about that is you can download it first, and then you don't have to have the internet, because the internet is very spotty in the park, so you can still enjoy the audio tour even if you don't have connection to the internet. People lived in pit houses here from AD 550 to about 750. The pit house you're looking at now was dug into the ground and features 4-corner timbers that support the roof. The fire pit had an air deflector to help air circulate through the room. Antechamber may contain storage bins, and some pit houses include a small hole in the floor, which may have had important symbolic meaning. Between 1150 and 1300, the classic Pueblo period, thousands of people lived in Mesa Verde. Many lived in compact villages of several homes, often with kivas or courtyards. Carefully shaped building stones, finely built and plastered wall surfaces, and advancing artistry in pottery making characterized this period. This circular underground room, part of the second village, represents another important change occurring in ancestral Pueblo life: the transition of pit house as family homes to structured called kivas. Small household kivas like this one may have been used for a mixture of routine and special purposes. In Pueblo villages today, kivas have special uses and meanings. Made of timbers, juniper bark, and mud, often form part of a plaza or public space. In modern Pueblo communities, the kiva is still an important ceremonial structure. Kiva comes from the Hopi language and is used in Mesa Verde to refer to round chambers, usually underground, built in or near almost every village or home site. Most have similar features and were likely used for combining religious, social, and utilitarian purposes. Entry was by ladder through a hole in the center of the roof. This is an ancient dwelling where they built home upon home. When one wore out, they just built another one on top of it and said, okay, we like it here, let's just keep building. This cliff dwelling includes the tallest standing architecture in Mesa Verde, a 4-story, 27-foot tall structure that was part of an even larger building complex. Although the site has been stabilized by archaeologists, 90% is original. Painted murals and pecked rock art are found throughout Square Tower House. As I look around at these various cliff dwellings, My mind comes to one question over and over again. Why would they build their homes on the side of a mountain or a cliff? They had to access these by ropes and ladders. It's like, wouldn't it be easier just to build it in the valley or up on the mesa? And I think the answer is yes, and they did for a period of time, but for some reason they moved their homes and structures into these little alcoves that were really difficult to access. I looked at several comments about this, and they had a lot of different theories about why they did it, for shelter and temperature and all these kind of things. And I only found one thing that mentioned security. And that was what came to my mind, is this is a move to secure the village. Not from animals or predators, and probably not from Europeans because they weren't in the area at that time, but I think from other Indian groups. So I think what they did is they built their homes out in the open, in the valleys or the mesas. They had a problem with people coming and robbing them, looting them, pillaging, whatever. And they decided that the best way to do it would be to build the houses on the side of a cliff. That way, if bad people came, they could pull the ropes, throw the ladders, and they'd have a much better way of defending their village. My mind kept going to this scene from Dances with Wolves, where Kevin Costner's character is assigned to a remote outpost in Indian territory. When he gets there, the outpost is completely deserted. Seemingly, the people have abandoned the above-ground buildings that they had and dug underground bunkers with thick doors on them. And he's a little puzzled as to why they're living underground instead of living in the post buildings. And then he soon finds out why, because they're under constant attack by local Indian groups. So I think this is kind of a similar human reaction to a situation where you are under attack constantly. You adjust and change your living situation to more protect where you live. So I think it's just kind of a natural human response, and I think the inhabitants of Mesa Verde probably did sort of the same thing. Pueblo oral tradition says that those who left this area during the warm, dry period in the late 800s migrated toward Chaco Canyon, located about 100 miles to the south. By the time this village in Kiva was built, 200 years later, Chaco had become a large and complex social system. Could ideas from Chaco have influenced Mesa Verde communities like this one? Oak Tree House is one of the larger cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde, and its residents lived in a busy neighborhood. Fire Temple and New Fire House are just up the canyon. Sun Temple sits above on the canyon rim, and many other cliff dwellings are nearby. At least one spring flowed from the near cliff. With at least 150 rooms, Cliff Palace is an exceptionally large cliff dwelling. It was constructed in a very special location, surrounded by a vibrant, active community. Several features suggest it was an important gathering place, perhaps an administrative or governmental center for the ancestral Pueblo society that centered around these canyons. The people who lived in the area were familiar with dozens of footpaths that led from the village to other villages, storage structures, farming areas, water sources. So in a couple days, I think we're going on a tour there to Cliff Palace, which is that. Oh, it doesn't go in anywhere. Do you go? Who goes there? It's me. Let me in. No, go away. We are the knights that say "Nee."